Good morning, everybody.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. This is the last session of this morning. We are gonna to share with you some papers concerning and studies concerning energy consumption and power demand. We have 4 different papers and different speakers that will take us into some spaces from Italy to Europe in general and the future of energy, what has happened with the pandemic around Europe and so on. I'm very delighted to host this session today. With respect to the program, we will start with Alessandro Sapio, who is currently Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Naples. And he will talk about the Italian behavior with respect to energy consumption in Italy during the period from the 90s to 2012. And Alessandro, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes for the presentation, and then we will have some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I thank the organizers for allowing us to have this opportunity. I will share my presentation with Khadija Merzogui, who is our former PhD student in Naples, and the paper is also co-authored with Damiano Fiorillo, who is an assistant professor of economics at the same university. This is a sort of a follow-up to a previous paper that has been published last year, where we analyzed the issue of energy saving on Italian data. We all know that among the main pillars of the energy transition, there is the set of all behaviors that can lead to energy saving. Energy saving and energy efficiency, which is of course a longer term concept, both can allow to minimize our impact on the environment and on climate. Because by saving energy and by making energy demand more efficient, we can basically save also on demanding for climate altering fossil fuels. And clearly, the problem that we start from is that we have an increasing trend of energy demand, and all the climate scenarios, all the climate projections tell us that we have to do something urgently. We have to take decisive action to reduce energy-related carbon dioxide emissions and also emissions from of other climate-altering gases. We know that the energy sector is one of the most impactful sectors in this respect, and in our research, we tackle one of the aspects which are more important in this respect. That is how individuals are affected in their decisions about energy saving. So if we want to give us policymakers important indications in how to fight against climate change, one of the things that we can do is to try and better understand how what are the determinants of energy saving. And so our goals in our research are to investigate the various determinants of energy saving in Italy, from the economic ones, of course, because we start from the economic perspective, but we also want to incorporate in the analysis demographic, social, cognitive, cultural determinants of energy saving in Italy. And we compare them the result. We basically perform the analysis on the 2012 ISTAT survey, which is a very rich survey on covering also energy-related behaviors in Italy from Italian households. And we compared the results with those obtained from a previous paper, the one cited here, written by myself and Damiano Fiorillo, that was published last year, where we focused on an older data set And the comparison is only a qualitative comparison because we don't have a panel. We cannot because of data limitations track the whole sample of individuals over time. Still, we are able to compare two periods which are different in several respects. And notably, in the meantime, there has been important institutional changes in Italy, such as electricity market deregulation on the one hand, and also the increasing public support towards renewables. In the previous paper, basically, one of the things that we found was that despite many individuals already had environmental preferences, the actual pro-environment attitudes didn't matter much. And the main determinants for energy saving behavior were still economic determinants. And we wonder if after many years of institutional change and many years of narratives in terms of sustainability, if anything has changed. And in terms of theoretical background, we know, of course, that energy saving is an economic decision, and we can resort to microeconomic theory for that. And I'm sure I don't need to recap that part of the theoretical explanation. But we also consider that there are many strains of literature according to which energy saving is also affected by socio-demographic factors, by psychological factors, because individuals are also characterized by bounded rationality, especially when it comes to decisions that are quite subtle, such as saving energy, decisions that are not visible from the outside. And then there are also contextual and situational factors. So, for instance, social capital may matter. Also, role models and, in general, cultural considerations may affect how people make these kind of decisions. And before giving the floor to my co-author Khadija, I want to mention that just for the sake of clarity, that in the paper we will focus on a proxy of energy saving. Basically, the questions in the ISTAT questionnaire that we analyze assume that individuals have a given set of equipment, energy consuming equipment. So basically, the questions relate to how they use the equipment, how they use the energy for a given kind of equipment. So we don't deal with energy efficiency, with how people decide on changing equipment towards less impactful ones. But our focus is on how people use their equipment, and in particular, which was a very simple proxy of energy saving, which is a shorter term kind of behavior. Now I'll give the floor to Khadija, who will give us more information on the data and on the analysis, on the empirical analysis.
Okay, thank you very much, Alessandro. And I want to thank everybody for this opportunity. Alessandro, please, can you keep your slides on?
Sure, sure.
Okay. So about the data and methodology, the sample consists of 19. I don't see your slides, Alessandro. Can you share them?
Yes, but I haven't done anything.
You don't have the possibility?
I can.
Okay.
Okay. I can go ahead with the slides while you talk. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so the socio-demographic factors are divided in three subgroups. We find the socio-economic factors, the dwelling factors, and the equipment factors. For the socioeconomic factors, in the literature, there are different results, so they are not conclusive. About household size, the presence of children and elderly individuals, employment status, and the income, the literature talk about a positive effect on energy consumption. While dwelling type and size, dwelling age, and homeowners also have positive effect. The equipment have also positive effects, but the major equipments that are treated are information technology appliances like mobile computers, etc., etc. Entertainment appliances like television, PlayStation, etc., and domestic appliances like, for example, washing machine and dishwashers. Another effect on energy saving, we can find the psychological side. Here there are two major theories that treats this side. We find the theory of planned behavior and the value belief norm theory. The first talks about the intention of the person to inform the energy, the related energy behavior, while the value belief norm theory talks about the effect of human values, beliefs, social norms, and behaviors in context of environmental view. In this background, we find three types of values: egoistic values, altruistic values, and biospheric values. So here, this theory supposes that if individuals care and are aware of environmental issues, so they tend easily to take energy saving. And finally, we find the external and situational factors that regards the social side, the cultural side, and other contextual variables. Here we find the attitudes, behavior, context that talks about the attitudinal factors towards saving energy, and the classical sociology that talks about the influence of the social norms on the behavior of the person. Social practices that consider the persons within a unit or social units, so the persons behave like the unit to which he or she belongs, and the cultural theories that supposes that the behavior derives from material culture, which considers the technology and the human capital that regards the participation of the individual in several activities, cultural activities. About the data, we consider microdata of 1,330 households that corresponds to about 4,600 individuals. However, we limit our analysis only to adult individuals due to an awareness of the behavior of energy saving. So we consider only individuals from aged from 16 years old to 90 years old. Hence, the final data sets consists of about 400 individuals. The survey is taken from the National Annual Survey program of the Italian National Institutes of Statistics of 2012. And the model consists of a product that tries to estimate the energy saving behavior in function of the variables that we saw before. So dwelling and equipment variables, socioeconomic variables, pro-environmental variables, and social and contextual variables. And in the results, we will show the marginal effects of this Provet model. The dependent variables, as we say, is the energy saving, but measured as the frequency of leaving the lights on in unused rooms. So the response corresponds to 1 if the persons never leave the light on, and 0 if the persons doesn't care about leaving the light on in unused rooms. About control variables, we take the variables that we saw in the literature. So there are socioeconomic variables that constitutes of age, education, unemployment status, marital status, gender, economic situation judgment, and economic resources judgment as a proxy of the income, as this survey doesn't present a variable, a measure of the income per se. And energy service satisfaction. In the dwelling variables, we include house ownership, house type, and the number of rooms, while in the equipment variables, we include communication appliances, entertainment appliances, and domestic appliances. In the communication appliances, we input computer, internet subscription, mobile, and voicemail. However, the computer was dropped from the data for a multicollinearity issue. The entertainment appliances is constituted of color television, while domestic appliances include dishwasher and washing machine. About the pro-environmental behavior, we included the interest or the concern of the person in environmental issues. So if the person is not interested in environmental issues, if interested with egoistic concerns, if interested with altruistic concerns, and then how the individual is informed about environmental issues. So if he is informed passively or actively. And also some behaviors, some pro-environmental behaviors, private, like for example, if the attitude the person in regard of water saving or water waste, and public pro-environmental behavior if the person throw papers in the streets. And finally, social and contextual variables that includes the frequency of meeting friends, attending the church, the trust in people.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but we need to go to results because we need to keep time, otherwise every section will be overlapping. Thank you, sorry.
Okay. About the results, we find that energy service satisfaction, being married, divorced, and widowed, are positively correlated with the energy consumption. However, the household economic resources judgment and the household economic situation judgment that are proxy of income are not statistically significant. About the age, only individuals aged from 16 to 30 years old are statistically significant with a positive effect on energy saving. Education seems to be negatively correlated with energy consumption, but only with regards to from bachelor's degree and over. Can you go ahead, please?
Yeah, and also unemployment is very important because we found, as expected, that unemployed
yes.
are more careful about saving energy.
Yes,
because
yes.
they have a lower income, presumably.
Okay.
We can maybe go to the slides where we summarize the results because we don't have much time.
Okay. About the dwelling and equipment variables, the ownership of dishwasher, color television, internet subscription, and voicemail are negatively correlated with the electricity conservation, while the ownership of a washing machine, mobile phone are positively associated with electricity saving. Pro-environmental attitudes also affect energy saving, but negatively. About if people who keep actively informed about the environmental and are more expected to engage the electricity saving, while individuals who pay attention to not wasting water at home and throwing paper in the street are also careful to not waste electricity at home. About social and contextual variables, meeting friends, trust in people, participation in cultural activities, and active membership are variables that are linked to electricity saving. However, active membership is not statistically significant, while church attendance and interested in political issues are positively correlated to electricity saving, but interested in political issues is not statistically significant.
So to conclude, please.
Yes. Can you conclude?
Yeah. Okay. I can draw the conclusions. So basically, in the previous paper, in the 1998 survey, the results highlighted that the chief determinants of energy saving were economic factors, despite the fact that there was no liberalized market for electricity. But at the same time, in that period, there was not such an emphasis on environmental issues. Surely the narrative about the urgency of climate change was not yet so cogent. Indeed, there were contrasting results on pro-environmental attitudes because the results suggested that even people who were actively involved in pro-environmental campaigns did not manage to save much energy, probably because they adopted a less efficient kind of decisions. Maybe they were not less economically efficient in that respect. The new results instead suggest that the impact of economic factors is a little less important. There are some indications that it's still very much important, but at the same time, we find that the active involvement in pro-environmental initiatives now leads to more energy saving, as if some more effective environmental culture has been developed. Now, of course, in our comparison, we cannot really make statistical tests. Our comparison is only qualitative, yet it may show us some future research avenue, and maybe in the future it may be very interesting to perform research on how the change in institutional context may have emphasized the social determinants of energy decisions. Our conjecture that we may want to explore in the future is that the behaviors, the energy saving behaviors, may have adapted to the higher risks associated with the market transactions, because now we have liberalized electricity markets even in the retail segment, and to the exposure to the sustainability narrative. Of course, it is only a working hypothesis that is derived from the qualitative comparison between the results that we have obtained over time, but I think it's still an interesting question to be answered in the future.
Thank you, Alessandro, and thank you, Khadija. I found really interesting your research, and as Alessandro was mentioning, it's obviously it will be very interesting to understand what is happening now. A lot of also utilities are using behavioral economics as part of their marketing campaign, I would say. So it's also very important for the business. I'm checking in the chat if we have any question for you. Let me just give the participant, the attendees, to see if they want to ask something. I don't see any question. If I can, I will ask you if you have tried to see the difference with other countries, and also trying to understand better what can happen after the period that you have analyzed. So if you have any perception of what is moving after 2012.
Well, so far we haven't looked at other countries. Of course, it would be very interesting. There is also always a comparability problems because the set of questions is never the same. And in fact, the other problem that relates to the comparison, what happened after, is probably limited by the fact that also even ISTAT, they perform this kind of surveys, not on a regular basis, and not every year, and not it's never really the same set of questions. So the comparison can never really be so so precise. But of course, I mean, in the future we may want to do a survey ourselves, maybe in some project, and in that case we can design the questionnaires in ways that allow comparison.
Yeah, I believe that there will be a lot of spaces. Yes, if you can work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. And I will now move to the program we were supposed to have. So we can start with the presentation from Manashvi Kumar. And he belongs to the batch of Indian Administrative Service allocated to Punjab cadre, and he has a variety of expertise from urban development and direct taxation, public finance, audit, energy, environmental, and power. And the paper he's going to present today is, as you can see from the title, Reclaiming Spaces of Energy Consumption. And it's a very interesting topic concerning India. Thank you for joining, and you have 15 minutes for your presentation. And then in the meantime, if anybody has any question, can post in the chat. Otherwise, I can allow a few minutes more for concluding the presentation. Thank you. The floor is yours.
A very good evening, ma'am, from India, Alexa, ma'am, and I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to allow me to present on this fora. And in fact, it would be a continuum to what Alessandro sir and student presented beforehand. What I'm trying to say is, from a practitioner's perspective and also a part of academia, that how do we claim spaces of energy consumption through localized energy management? And if we have to address the issues of localized energy management, then we should understand the demand side issues as well. Because India is making great surges because of its promises on the international fora in terms of integration of renewables. So for us, the integration of distributed energy resources at the local level does matter. So when we talk of all of this, then we also need to talk of how do we cater to demand response, and at the same time, how do we forecast for demand? So a bit of a disclaimer, being a civil servant, a public servant, whatever I'm going to say or show is basically my empirical data based on my doctoral research from across different geoclimatic zones and physiographic divisions in the country. So the session outline would be broadly across these 5 themes. I would be showing the big data, the numbers from the technical arm of the government of the Ministry of Power, the Central Electricity Authority. I will also talk of the aspirations of the people in terms of the policy rollouts that have been there, how these two are antithetic to the ground realities, what we can observe as I take you through the subnational geographies of the great nationality that is India. Then I again come back to the policy construct and I try to identify a few gaps and try to suggest the solutions. So this is how we have fared ever since independence, from 1947 to the year very recent, 2019. This is the data that is available. So the per capita consumption of power, this has been like, we have moved from 16 units to 1,181 way back. This is the data, this is the latest data from the Central Electricity Authority. Since the entire presentation would be focusing on rural India, so it's very important. Like we did advertise that we said we have actually electrified all the households in the country. That was on 28th of April in 2018. So if I see, you can see to the left side, the bar is actually 0. And then we say it's 5,97,464. In terms of the different sectors actually, which are the end users of energy, my presentation is essentially going to focus on the rural domestic consumer. So they have a fair enough share of 24.76%. Then we have the commercial sector with an 8.24%. Then we have the industry with 41.16%. Agriculture, 17.69, traction 1.52, and again, miscellaneous 6.63. So with a broad generalization, I can just club 24.76 and add 17.69. So that adds up to around 43 to 44% agriculture and domestic category, which is very crucial, India still being a prime riparian economy. So this is in a broad framework. This is the installed generation capacity of all the subnational, that is the integrated states in the country. And we have the capacity, as on date, it is around 365 gigawatts. The figure is for the last year. That was till 31st of March 2019. So this is where we stand. And we are also marching towards the target of 175 gigawatts till the year 2022. So we have around 90 gigawatts of power being generated at the installed capacity from the renewable energy sources. So coming back to the very important constitutional ethos, commonly known as the AARQA goals, that the kind of power the kind of electricity, the quality, the availability, the reliability that is available to the end user at the far end, at tail end of retail consumerism, power has to be available. He should access as and when he desires. It should be reliable. The supply has to be reliable. The quality has to be good in terms of no voltage fluctuations. And moreover, from his perspective, from the end users, he should be able to afford it. So basically, when I talk of PFA, it's power for all. This has been the mandate for the government. And it says that at least this was an old target that by the year 2012, we should be considering electricity to be a merit good. If we price it low, so the consumption increases. So at least we should be able to give at least 1 unit of power 24/7, 365 to the entire populace of country. So who are the actors in the action arena? So these are basically on the left-hand side. You can see the snippets from different parts of the Indian states where I did my field work. So there's a Panchayati Raj institutions, the lowest tier of the local self-government in a village. Then these are the three representative next from the non-state actor, the PICO or the microgrid, mini-grid service operators. Then we have this formal access to energy where you can see a meter dwelling unit. Then we have an informal non-revenue source of energy where the meter has been burned. Then we see whether the power systems in terms of whether it's the private entity or the state entity or a mixed entity in terms of public-private partnerships, there are serious issues of legitimacy of these mechanisms that ensure access. Then we have the entire billing and consumption cycle wherein these are the parameters how we need to increase or bolster the revenues which are due to the utilities. And then at the end of the day, we are, who is my client basically to I'm catering? That is the passive consumer. So this is the core of the presentation. This is the entire crux, basically the fate of a rural domestic supply category consumer who is actually at the end of the tail end, the tail end. So when we have to conceive a decentralized energy systems, which is the constitutional mandate, or we talk in terms of local energy management, how do we do this when we do not have a robust system of demand aggregation and demand profiling? So what happens? Everybody at the tail end actually is waiting for the my energy moment. When would that happen? So we have different kinds of inputs going into that. We have the state actors in terms of the state nodal agencies who are trying to promote solar power packs through small capacity, micro, mini or pico grids. There's an ocean of literature on that. So you can see the real photographs. Then you have the representatives, the engineers from the state utility who are supposed to do that. Then you have the famous IWMI and MGVCL group, which says that solar is a remunerative crop. And then you have the traditional villagers of Gujarat in the far-flung Khera district, where still power is yet to come. They are wanting for that 24/7, 365. And then there's a gentleman who you can see is lighting up the traditional diya that is known in Hindi. Basically, it's a candle based. So what I'm trying to talk in technical terms is about the demand response is asymmetric, because even if you have a metered supply or you think you have put in a meter and if you are not monitoring it through your regulation or enforcement, then the signals which are received at the substation level may not be true. So you have formal connections, as I saw electricity meter, then I say it's an informal connections where it actually means that the people do not have access to power, but they do have access to power through illegal tapping of power lines. So I have labeled that as non-revenue power. And then you have certain players who have now sprung up, because there are a few states in the country who have come up with their micro or mini grid regulations, wherein they are free to utilize the open access regime and put in their systems. But then that is far, far away from the aspiration of 1 unit. So these are very small rudimentary lighting, which we can actually see. And this is one of the RESCOs, which is functional in the state of Uttar Pradesh, northern part of the country. So this has been the variation in the base load demand. So what are these graphs basically? So from the left to the right, these are the actual consumption from an aggregate of dwelling units from different parts of the country, from the rural populace having the same kind of occupational structure. Most of them have been engaged in the unorganized sector, that is the farm sector, or they are small-time entrepreneurs, with they are self-employed basically. So the first is IAY, is basically a government-sponsored program, Indira Awas Yojana. We can see its total load is about of half a unit. Then this is a solar power pack, and the entity is Mera Gaon Power, where a paltry 0.017 is the load. Then we have one of the SNAs from the state of Gujarat. So the state also pitches in. So that is even approximating to half a unit. And this is how, and when I say NEDU stands, basically, these are the non-electrified dwelling units, but they have some kind of access to informal power. But then for the part of the utilities, this is non-revenue power, basically. They're drawing power, but then they are not being built for that, as we have seen. And then in the last, that is the tallest bar, this is basically one of the hamlets with a metered connection. And since the variety of appliances is more and the consumer is aware, so he's utilizing that to the best of his abilities. We'll see all of that right now. So these are the kinds of appliances that I actually mapped and actually did a complete survey from the different kind of consumers who were there in a particular dwelling unit, whether he or she was an engaged earning member or a student or a homemaker, all of that, and what do they think of the appliance usage, and in terms of access to power, what kind of device they would want to use given a particular time of day. So coming to these are the basically, I used a huge slews of ethnographic material, so made use of visual ethnography actually, and on the left side I did the prepared the planimetric map with the help of different kinds of tools, basically AutoCAD drawings, to bring in the speakers to the context. Basically, this is the real context of which the translation was there in terms of load consumption. So this is from Uttar Pradesh. Then this is the RESCO, which is supplying power. So you can see the entire system of power setup and the kind of service that is being provided. Then this is from Gujarat, the solar power pack by the state nodal agency, the kind of service that is being provided. Then this is one of the dwelling unit programs in the state of Uttar Pradesh, again a subnational government, which is known as Loya Awas Yojana, so the kind of facilities that is being provided. This is the setup. Then this is in Bihar, basically. I'm talking towards, taking you towards the eastern part of the country. Then this is again the kind of consumption or the kind of customer that we are catering to. So coming to the broader policy issues. So the tariff policy, the electricity policy, the regulator basically say that the heart of tariff structure, the heart of energy planning or the access should ideally be driven by the consumer's load and consumption pattern. We should also take into account the timing of supply, the actual local environments, and the purpose for which the power is being utilized, so that the sector actually remains vibrant and viable. And we actually believe in the ethos that we treat the consumer in the present electricity market as the sovereign entity. So there are certain precursors to the tariff setting process. There are a whole lots of agencies which are involved at the national level and at the subnational levels. The objectives and priorities are broadly the same as I had shown in the AARQA goals. However, because of the performance of the utility on the basis of the technology, finance, their operational structure, the local political and the social environment, a lot still remains to be done. And moreover, the kind of tariff setting procedures which are followed at the subnational level, every state has its own norm, though being broadly regulated by the central regulator. So ideally, what should be the elements of the tariff design basically? So the appropriateness of tariff should actually be in the present context, should be guided by the national goals, which I had already discussed, and should also support the integration of renewable energy. And when all of this is done, then we are actually talking of in terms of demand side management. But there are serious issues which are related to the tariff, because we have different hierarchies, we have different slabs, we have different subcategories. And then this is not real-time pricing also. So there are serious issues of real-time demand management. Just to show you, so these are few states from where you can see what are the number of categories, the number of slabs, and the number of subcategories. Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Karnataka, and West Bengal, to talk of a few. So these are within the same classification, you have such broad categorizations. So how do I address that? So basically what I'm trying to say is when we go for demand forecasting, there are models which actually say we should not go for time series analysis, but we should actually go for end use profiling of consumers, where you can see, like in the earlier presentation, it was said, we should go into the socio-economic demographic profiling, because this is very important, because it is the actual culture, these local social ethos, the political structure, the economic structure actually, which governs the consumption pattern. So we are being spurred by the national targets, as we made a mention of 175 gigawatt, and we are aiming at 450 by 2030. We need to do a lot in terms of demand forecasting and demand estimation and demand profiling, especially when we talk of rural India. So it's not that the government has not done anything. Government has been taking initiatives through different programs and schemes, but then we need to do more in terms of end use, consumer profiling, in terms of actual connected load and the gap between the connected and the declared load. We also need to drive in that rural electrification, or basically the entire scenario of access to energy is about not about product experience, but about the inherent intrinsic value of user electrification. Again, there's an ocean of literature on that. So basically what I see is that we are missing when it comes to demand side management or addressing issues of demand response. So what was the finding of my work was basically we need to analyze and assess the renewable energies resource potential for every single location in the country, whether it's in terms of biomass, whether it's in terms of solar or wind, and then try to study what is the gap between a policy design and actual reality. So I should say that the real public is missing in terms of public policy. If I say electricity is a merit good, does it really qualify to be one? Because I just showed that we have a plethora of demand. There's a huge profile of demand. There is a variation in density of consumption. There's a variation in the desired load. There is a huge variation in terms of access, in terms of usage of appliances, in terms of timing of day. So how does one do real-time dynamic pricing? Because with advances in telemetry, we are actually increasing granularity, but we are not addressing the actual issue, that is when we are trying to give access to energy in terms of customer or consumer satisfaction. So basically, we need to address issues at the level of the subnational governments and also at the level of local institutions of local self-government. Like we need to basically right now improve the poor quality of baseline data. We need to create baseline data, and that is what an attempt was made by me while traveling to different parts of the country to create basically the baseline energy flows in different dwelling units and households across India. The tariff structure, again, it is not reflective of the actual cost of supply, which is a very serious thing. And it is already laid down in the Electricity Act and the National Tariff Policy that unless and until we address all of these, we cannot meet the universal service obligation or the state budgeted schemes and the direct benefit transfer for access to electricity. So basically, these are the some lot.
Sorry, Manash, sorry, but we need to conclude. Otherwise, it's very complicated.
So this is my last slide. So what I propose is we should move from a regime of technological alienation to technological acculturation. Because what we are trying to do is we are again trying to do supply side management. But if we have to do local energy management, we have to actually bring in the new models and new techniques of demand response and demand forecasting and measuring the demand at the last end, at the end of retail, because then we need to make use of end use methods. So basically, once these two arrows move towards each other, we can study the microsystems and integrate DR and DF. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Manash. Sorry but it's short time for every presentation. For me, it's been really insightful to better understand the Indian situation for electricity, and try to see if we have any questions on the chat. Just 1 second, if someone wants to write and ask for any clarification. Okay, we don't have any questions. Okay, Alessandro, yes, go please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manoj, for your interesting presentation. I have a comment and a curiosity. The comment, I mean, is inspired by the fact that you showed a very impressive data on how complex is the structure of tariffs, depending on the state. That is really very interesting to know and really impressive. And in fact, the problem with the electricity tariffs is not only that whether they reflect the actual costs, but even if they do, they may be so complex as to not really allow the consumers, even the more sophisticated ones, to make really efficient decisions. So this is really this is really an important issue. And the curiosity that I had, I was reading a few days ago that India is one of the better positioned countries for green hydrogen, which of course will, if the projections, if it really materializes as a leading technology, will really involve the end consumers very much. So I was wondering if your analysis and your considerations will be affected by when green hydrogen will diffuse in the coming years.
So, may I respond, sir?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for pointing that out. In fact, sir, for my analysis, I did do renewable energy resource assessment, sir, through my instrumentation, and that was for solar and for waste from 3 different category types. So that was waste from a dwelling unit, animal refuse, and human refuse. So for 52 villages spread across 8 states and 1 island, that was Andamans, I did a complete demand side modeling for that. What is the potential of solar and biogas for every single geographical location? And the grid is already there, sir. The grid is already there, but the grid remains underutilized because the fundamental question was that, sir, if my lifestyle is not energy intensive, so do I qualify to be labeled as energy poor? And then, sir, this was not the case. So at many locations, if I may say by the literature that, okay, space heating was not there, but sir, then the kind of subsidies, the kind of cross-subsidization, the kind of targeted subsidies which are there, so you could, within the energy ladder hypothesis, you could find all kinds of high efficiency fuels within the same dwelling unit, and you could also find all the range of appliances, basically. So like what your student was saying, like if I say the drivers were communication, entertainment, lighting. These were actually some within the dwelling unit, the drivers. So coming to your broader policy perspective about green hydrogen. So in fact, I believe that in India, we have huge potential for biogas. So that was way back, even before I was, when I was born, that was 1978, 79, we rolled out the National Biogas Manure Management Program. So there are countries who are leaders, like Germany, if I may say so, or the Dutch countries, so 60 to 100 terawatt hours, basically. So when you have potential, you have an R&D for that. You already have that with you. One should harness those resources first, and then actually buy a real-time assessment of demand and whether that resource is available. Because when we consider tariff, we say whether a particular kind of generator is available or not. Because these are technologies of the future. So definitely if green hydrogen, I'm not too much aware, sir, as to what is the potential, how are we going to unlock that with the current R&D facilities in the country. But yes, when I talk of biogas, when I talk of solar, I can say we can go for pico or microgrid modeling for every village in this country, and we can become power surplus. And at the same time, sir, we will be able to become, we can say at the international arena, yes, we are doing enough for climate change, because it's about energy literacy. If we do things big, the end consumer, he may not be aware of the broader national or the international goals that a government or a polity is trying to achieve, sir. That is my fear. So that is why I say like a technology implant may not result in technological acculturation, basically, and that might disrupt social order, sir. So going back, sir, to that, basically the classic, like by Robert Putnam, that has been, and by Eleanor Ostrom, that has been the framework for my thesis, for the complete analysis. It was a lot of interdisciplinary things were there in the thesis, sir. So it was like, what we should do, basically 10 years hence, and then the technologies of future, because on storage front, we have not been able to do anything as on date. We have been doing everything for solar and wind, but within the family of renewables, again, the same concentricity is there, that is for oil or coal or gas or LNG. And so within the hydrogen, whether it's green hydrogen or blue hydrogen, or what kind of hydrogen, we are actually trying to figure out. So okay. Definitely the perspectives would change, sir. Definitely. That's a given. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manashvi. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, now we can move to Thierry Baudoir. We move to France with Enerdata. Thierry, we talk about what we expect for energy consumption in 2020 after this pandemic that has affected all the world. And Thierry, can you say 2 words about yourself and your background, and then share with us your analysis? Thank you.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Thank you very much. I'm on behalf of Enerdata. I'm really grateful for you two having us and having me today. So I am Thierry Baudoir. I'm working in Enerdata, and now I'm head of research, which is a team of 8 to 10 people. And today I will present you a study that we have firstly presented early on this year in the spring, and that we have updated in September, October. And it deals with estimations of energy consumption worldwide, or in this case, we focus on G20. And this is something that we are not used to do within Enerdata. Within Enerdata, we are pretty strong and sharp for long-term forecasting, especially for energy demand. But short-term, it was a new exercise for us, so we learned quite a lot during this exercise, and we believe it was interesting to share this with you. So as I said, it was a new exercise for us, and of course for all of us, as we have to face the new sanitary context, and the energy system has been directly impacted because of the COVID crisis. So we wanted to estimate what will be the impact. So we first started in spring, and we conduct studies trying to look at the elasticities between the GDPs and energy consumption. Of course, at the beginning of the year, we had very few data, but some forecast of GDP. So we developed a detailed methodology which is based partly on elasticity from GDP to energy consumptions. On top of that, in terms of elasticity, we use some elasticity in normal context, and also we use the elasticity we have calculated internally using that we have seen recorded during the 2008-2009 crisis, which was more financial crisis, but still we have a dramatic drop in terms of GDP. So we use those elasticities, and we also refine our work. And we also refine our work depending on the kind of lockdown and restart of each in each country, because of course, as you know, the government did not handle the COVID crisis in the same way, and we are trying. We try to put it in numbers, and especially in looking at the energy demand. So our model, our small tool, let's say, is going to every G20 countries and covering the major energy demand sector, which are, in our model, the industry, the transport, services, or tertiary sector, and residential. It also covers the power sector, but today we won't speak a lot about that. And at the end, we have estimated the CO2 emissions. So the first things we point out is that still the final energy consumption is dependent on the GDP, or there is quite a relationship, because as you see on the big region, a big country throughout the world, we see that both the GDP and the final energy consumption move in the same way. So when we look at each of the zones, we see that China has been slightly impacted this year, or much less than in other parts of the world. The first thing is that they have very strong industry, and they have a recovery package that started pretty early in the year, and the subsidies a lot some sector which are really energy intensive. So this is how we explain that we believe that China will record a positive number in terms of energy consumption this year. While the situation in the US and in Europe is very different, because we, as you can see on the screen, we believe the energy consumption will be definitely decreasing. We also notice on this graph that the USA and the EU, this is EU 28, so we still include UK at the time we run this study. We see that in the US, the GDP is dropping much less than final consumption, and we explain that because the transport has a large share within the final consumption in this country, and especially the transport and the air transport, internal air transport has been hit very hard. And conversely, in the EU, European Union, the GDP growth is much, the GDP reduction is much higher than the final energy consumption, and we do explain that the specificity of the European Union, if we take out Germany, and many countries have very strong tertiary sector, especially tourism for Latin countries like Italy, Spain, or even France or Greece. And as the transport has been cut, the tourism sector has suffered a lot, but still kept consuming a little of energy, and those sectors are very low energy intensive. So here, in the previous slide, we've seen a very different pattern between the US and the European Union. So we investigate how we could explain that. So we took the UK, because UK is quite a transparent country in terms of data accessibility. And we looked at, on the left side, the contribution, the sector that contributed to the recession in terms of GDP. And on the right side, you see the final energy consumption reduction that we have modeled for the 6 first months. Sorry, it is not modeled on the right, is actual data on final energy consumption. And we see that even if the scopes are not especially exactly the same, because in terms of GDP, there is no specific section on transport. But on the left side, we see the GDP recession is mainly due to services and public. So the tertiary sector has been pretty much stopped. So no activity in the first semester of 2020 in the UK. So over the 10% of the fall of GDP, 8% is attributed to the tertiary sector. And on the right side, if you look at the blue bar, is very small, and we see that the actual final energy consumption drop in the same sector is very low. So this is how we explain difference between the GDP drop and the final energy consumption drop. So this is due to the structure of the economy. And then we have a focus on two kinds of energy. So first the transport, and then we'll look at the electricity. So the transport, as you can see, we believe the global or G20 final energy consumption in transport should drop around 10%, which is huge. If we compare to the drop of such energy consumption, the largest drop before were from those from the 1970s oil shock, and still at this time it was about 5 to 8%. And usually since then, every year the energy consumption in transport is growing. So the drop we record this year, or we estimate, is huge. It's something very specific to this year, and two main factors explain that. The lockdown, especially for the passenger area, had a strong impact, and on the other side, the economic slowdown has lowered all the transport linked to freight and business, but the main impact is on passenger transport. Conversely, we believe that the electricity consumption has been quite less affected by this crisis. As most of you know, I guess, the electricity consumption is trendly contracting in OECD's countries, especially in Europe. Over the past years, the consumption of electricity is slowly decreasing. And as you can see, we compare the decrease in 2009 and 2020, we'll see that the drop is not this big as we could have expected. And the first reason why we believe the drop is not this big is because of the fact that electricity is quite essential commodity today. We use electricity, we consume electricity in many cases. So we are kind of addicted to electricity, and this is why we cannot go away from electricity consumption. And then when we look at factors that explain the drop, of course, industry is the main factor, because it has been hit, and the relationship between the industry activity and consumption is quite high. within the tertiary sector, sorry, we don't see, we don't expect a big decrease, and conversely, in the residential sector, we believe that this part of the consumption should be growing a little. When we, on top of our energy consumption forecast, when we put the carbon mix from the evolution of the carbon mix from the power sector, we see that we estimate that the world CO2 energy emissions should drop around 8.5% this year. So still keep in mind, like, those data are based on data in September, and so we couldn't take into account the second wave of lockdown. So those data are still estimates, and we see that many all the countries around the world should record decrease in CO2 emission, even China. So still the data on China could be adjusted, but we believe the drop should be significant this year. So this is a summary. So we can see that the economic growth was supposed to be minus 4.5%, while the energy consumption we assume it to be dropping by 6%, and converted into the CO2 emission should be 8.6%. My last slide is again a new exercise in our data. As I said in the introduction, we are good at long-term forecast, but we wanted to improve at short-term. So we have developed a small model internally using our pools model, which is usually providing three types of scenarios. The NR base, which is the business as usual data, the NR blue, which take into account the current climate policies that the states have committed to implement within their NDCs, and the NR green, which is a more scenario that will be in line with Paris Agreement to reach 1.5 to 2 degrees scenario. So the slides is, as I said, a new exercise, and what we believe in our data at this time is that in any case, we believe that there will be a rebound in 2020. So we use data, GDP data by large institutions, and at this stage, all the institutions predict a rebound next year. So we believe it will happen in terms of CO2 emission also. But the package that the countries and European Union are now deploying will have a definitely strong impact on the CO2 emissions and climate policies. And we believe that even in 5 years, depending on the choice made by governments, we may have quite different impact in terms of CO2. So yes, so thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much, Thierry, for your presentation. Let me check if you have any question. I believe that you gave us a very nice framework of what has happened and also what you expect. There will be a lot of game changers in the next months that we have to take into account and to look for. We mentioned some during this session, and I can't see a question in the chat. I don't know if, okay, Manashbi, yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Harry, so I just wanted to ask, that is really a very interesting correlation between the GDP vis-a-vis power consumption. But I am always interested in how do we see the HDI vis-a-vis power consumption and how this actually fit into the broader frame, because GDP is a huge database, basically. And see, if I talk of India, I just said about 1181 units from Paltry 16 from 1947. And on HDI report, which has been released, so we are actually at 0.635. So the countries which are very, very proximal to 1, so the power consumption is around per capita consumption and hovers in the range of 3,500 to 4,000 units. So once you did this correlation, and especially when the conference is being held, as we are actually moving through a pandemic scenario, how do you see this vis-a-vis any search of a better correlations or not a correlation at all, a causality in terms of that, basically?
So let me make sure I understood well you want your question. Your question is what the correlation between GDP and power demand, or so in terms of elasticity, right?
So, yes, sir. How do you place the HDI? So it's all about development of human being, basically. Energy intensity, we are trying to increase energy intensity in our lives, basically. So at the same time, we are trying to increase, we say it will not increase carbon footprint because technologies are evolving. So within the broad framework of GDP vis-a-vis power consumption, how do you see a human end user, basically, in terms of human development index?
And I'm pretty sure to answer on the development index, human development index. This is not something we have done specifically. Yes, so I'm sorry about that, but I'm afraid.
So most of the the graphs, basically, the countries were shown sub-zero when we were comparing 2019-20. So what does that actually means in terms of power consumption? Because the countries have been growing, the economies have been growing, maybe not nearing 7 or 8% or 9%, but definitely stagflation has been there. 4%, 4.5, 5, 6. This has been the figures for major economies across the globe, sir. We are also part of that. So I just wanted to have more clarity on that slide, sir, that particular slide.
Okay, I believe it depends a lot on the structure of each countries. Some countries, as we explained, have very strong industries, and usually industry is very energy intensive. And some countries, like in Europe, let's say for France or UK, which is very oriented to the tertiary sector, the impact is not very very, very different from one country to another. So it's difficult to have a definitive conclusion on all countries.
So, thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sergey.
Thank
you, Sergey, for your presentation. And we now move to the last, but not least, speaker of the day, Professor Yunus Purica. His CV is so long that I'm embarrassed in what to say about him. He holds 2 PhD. One in nuclear energy engineering, and the second one in economics. Actually, he is senior researcher in the Romanian Academy Institute for Economic Forecasting. He is executive director of the Advisory Center for Energy and Environment. He has been counselor for many ministers, economy, environment, expert for the Parliament of Romania. And today we'll share with us some views about switching to full electric transport and the implication for the power requirements. Thank you, Yuni.
Thank you for the presentation. Since we're talking Italy, allow me to say in excess of what you just mentioned, that First, as an associate researcher of ICTP Trieste and an ex-ENEA researcher, I found out that my name is having an Italian connotation. Ion is Giovan, and
Okay.
the diminutive that is used mostly in Sicily is Giovanuzzo.
Okay.
Let me mention just 3 hats that I've had in my history, professional history. First, it was a question of ex-ENEA doing environment and energy. Second, a World Bank project officer on energy and infrastructure. And third, member of the advisory group for energy of the European Commission. Actually, being in those places made me advertising for various type of ministers that wanted some advice on various things. I don't want to take too much time. I won't present. I will just challenge you with some ideas. One of the things that I wonder all the time, and you may look my name on Amazon, you'll find some books, is nonlinear behavior. Actually, it started with the old the limits of growth of the Club of Rome. We should mention Club of Rome. We're talking in Italy now. Then logistic evolution done by Cesare Marchetti and Nakicenovic in IASA. And finally, MEMS by Richard Dawkins to understand, to describe behavior. Putting all that together, it's a question of trying to understand what are the limits that are driving a logistic evolution, a saturation. And in case of transport, and I've been doing an exercise that everybody may do, I looked into Eurostat and made some energy balance, took out how much fuels are consumed yearly by the road transport of the European Union, transformed that into energy, into actually electrical energy that has got to load the batteries of the future electric transportation of Europe. Obviously, the Green Deal of the Commission is talking about neutral emissions at the level of, at the horizon of 2050, 55% reduction in 2030, recently voted actually. I just took 2060 just to make to be sure that it's done. Actually, we need extra power generated, electric power generated, electrical energy to load the batteries of the electric cars. Obviously, I will mention at the end why we have to switch to hydrogen. But the idea is that by doing a new technology in transportation, we are actually commuting or shifting the largest local polluter of emissions, which is transport, to the largest general polluter of emissions, which is energy. Obviously, if we produce energy to load batteries, then that energy has got to be at lower emissions than what the transport sector is emitting now, based on a per energy consumption basis. So I took the data that I have just mentioned and calculated how much energy is needed per year to make electric transportation, to reach all transportation, road transportation in European Union to electric. It's a big investment in new power generation that has got to be done up till 2060, as I told you. Not talking about 2050, it's even larger a little. But all our electric companies or power generation companies and electric distribution companies, let's not forget, we are in a power market nowadays in the European Union, have got to really set aside some money to invest into more power generation. Obviously, what type of power generation we want to invest in is actually driven by the level of emissions that power generation has got to have in order to emit less or zero, but less than the emissions that are now done by the transport energy use. And that is in the range of about 300 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour, slightly less. But obviously, if we want to go to neutral emissions, to zero emissions, we have to actually go for either renewables and nuclear, the two, or actually two classes of technologies that we have that are having either a relatively distributed power like renewables, or a high power per unit of generation like nuclear. With the new technologies of small nuclear reactors, modular reactors, and the new types of renewables that are technologies that are coming in, I think we have to concentrate very thoroughly on how much we want to invest in energy, such that to allow the penetration without a moment of saturation of transportation, electric or hydrogen, because hydrogen is actually fueling fuel cells that are actually going also into providing energy for electric transportation. So I'm talking only European Union. Other countries are having the same problem, obviously, and I like that we are starting to discuss credibility of the technologies in order to have them penetrate, people's attitude toward the various technologies that are making a very important point into how fast and how well new technologies are going to be distributed. There was an old example in NA, I'm not mentioning it, with a key ready factory that was stopped because the community nearby didn't want it started. Obviously, it was a question of belief and credibility, not of technological feasibility. So these are the basic ideas that I wanted to convey to you in a nutshell. We can discuss a lot of those things. We have done some analysis and other type of studies and things like that. But the main thing is that we should look into the saturation moment of various technologies that we want to implement right now, and into the drivers of those saturation and limits that have got to be crossed in order to really have a shift, a complete change of paradigm in energy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonas. Okay, in the meantime, I wait if there are any Q&A to give you some spaces to explain better your feeling. Can you give us some numbers, at least percentage, of what is needed according to your calculation in Europe? And if, as I imagine, there is heterogeneity between countries, some would be more safe, I would say, in coming into a more electrified world, and some other. Okay.
I told you about emissions as a limit that has got to be made under by the energy for the electric batteries, electric transportation. The amount of energy at the level of the whole European Union resulted in something like 5,000 megawatt installed every year till 2050. Okay, just to from what it is today in terms of fuel consumption for road transportation, converting that into electricity that would actually load the batteries. But obviously, for each country, the figure is specific, and depending, as you saw, we may have a shift in transport behavior, like what was already presented a moment ago for 2020, and we don't yet know how that will actually evolve. A detailed analysis may be done for each country. When I was in ENEA, for example, I did an analysis of the dynamics of risk in the Italian natural gas network, and some interesting results came out of that. I even got the award of ISPESL at the time. But the whole thing is that obviously, for the moment, what I wanted to convey to you was some figure for the whole European Union.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is up to a certain point irrelevant, given the lack, if I may say so, of the what we call acquis communautaire in energy. Germans are doing energy Wende and are shutting down nuclear. The French have got the nuclear. Others are discussing various other possibilities. The Poles have got the coal a lot, and they are passing to nuclear, some nuclear right now. Italy is having various type of referendums, unfortunately, immediately after Fukushima, in terms of taking back the nuclear. You know, when I came to Italy back a long time ago, it was Montalto di Castro, the nuclear power plant, ready to start, and the referendum that said, well, we should shut down the nuclear. So you see, each country has got its own pattern of energy use, energy production, and so on. And a detailed analysis may be done based on each country's
Sure. Thank you.
behavior.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any other question from the speakers of today? From the Q&A chat, I can't see any question. Otherwise, I will thank you a lot, all of you, for taking part. I have learned a lot, and it's been very interesting discussing all the different features concerning energy demand all around the world and the perspective for our futures. Thank you very much for being here with this conference, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.